Downtown Detroit is, I'm going to say, typical among cities in the US, cities in North America, and actually cities all over the global north. One way to revitalize downtown cores over the last 30 years has been to increase police visibility. And you absolutely see it in downtown Detroit. Police are hyper visible, uniformed, and ready. Uh, it- Especially at the times of night that they most want restaurant goers, event attenders to feel safe. And that's been a huge part of their strategy. It's definitely visible, Amy.
What's the thinking behind making policing more visible?
So there is absolutely no research and no one who's educated on these matters who would argue that increasing police visibility actually reduces crime. That's not a thing to say it that way. However, there's limited and positive evidence that says that perceptions of safety, perceptions that a place is law and order, clean and safe, do increase when you have that police visibility. That's what those downtown cores are looking for.
How important is there to make a distinction between perception of safety and actual safety?
Oh, that's night and day. So in downtown Windsor, for example, recent crime reports show that crime is, if anything, down. Downtown is safer than it was in the recent past. That said, if people don't perceive that they're safe, they don't come out to spend money. They don't come out to be patrons at restaurants. They don't make it so that small businesses can flourish. It's that perception of safety that you're really trying to fight. And ultimately, for small business owners and the BIA or city council, for example, it's as important, right, or almost as important as actual safety, in thinking through whether you can revitalize a downtown, which is what the goal of this program is.
And I can imagine if you feel more safe, like you've mentioned, you're more willing to go downtown. What role does that play in making a city become more vibrant?
Well, right, if no one's there to patronize businesses, go out or hang out, then I don't know what the word vibrant means. That's key.
Yeah. And over the past 30 years, there's been something called the broken window theory. So, New York City was one of the first places to adopt this. And I understand you were living there at the time. Can you explain what that means and what your experience of it was?
So I often say this, or I remind people, I'm from New York originally. I grew up in Queens. Giuliani was mayor of New York. He was elected when I was 12 years old. So when we talk about broken windows theory, and my research involves this, and I've published on the question, I've seen firsthand, right, the way that the police can become the front line in reducing what are called quality of life crimes. Now, there's a tremendous cost to this. When we talk about police brutality in the Giuliani administration in New York, for example, I mean, these are really horrible reputations to have. The idea, though, is that sure, you have really violent and right, deeply troubling crimes, and the police have to get to the bottom of that, right? But those crimes often exist because there's a feeling of there's no law and order. There's nothing that's positive that's going on here, and that feeling, that comes from the graffiti. That feeling comes from relatively minor quality of life problems, including literally jaywalking, Amy. And if the police can get ahead of those minor or relatively minor crimes, then people don't feel like they can commit more major crimes. The neighborhood doesn't feel out of control. The research on broken windows theory is pretty clear that it's not true. Like, by cleaning up the graffiti, you don't end the assault or the murder. That said, feelings among middle class non neighborhood residents do change because of broken windows theory. Now, we don't actually really talk about broken windows theory, especially municipal level governance anymore, right? We more talk about clean and safe initiatives. Ultimately, it's the same thing, but now when you say you want a downtown core that's clean and safe, you're working to resource those same anti-small quality of life programs as you would when you were talking about broken windows.
I want to bring it back to Windsor, and I'm wondering what our expectations should be. Can Windsor see similar results that we see in Detroit?
I I hate to try to look into the future, and there's many, many elements to revitalizing a downtown core. That said, I always think it's interesting to think about what police can do that isn't crime fighting full stop. Okay. One of the most promising programs, I think that most of your audience and probably you will agree, is the nurse police program that's come out and being expanded. What a great way to really get to quality of life for downtown city residents who are most vulnerable. Partnerships between police and social workers work in much the same manner. Police are key in those collaborations. It is not their crime fighting core duty. That said, because they are relatively well resourced and because they already have systems in place, when they partner with public health, when they partner with social work, they're able to demonstrate the existence of problems, find social issues at the grassroots level, be able to measure, document so that we can get resources at not just the municipal level, but the provincial and national level. Without those programs, it is much more difficult for the downtown core to demonstrate where the need is and address it, meeting people where they're at. Calls for defund the police, right, in order to more heavily resource social issue helpers like social workers and nurses. We can also think about the opposite of that, which is the police can use their funds to facilitate social workers and public health and nurses. We're doing that in the downtown core. That's really exciting to my mind and to see as a criminologist. It's the far more compassionate side of broken windows theory of clean and safe, and hopefully where this program is going, where it appears to be going. That said, always when you have an increased police presence, the question is safer for who, or perceived as safer for who. While I believe that through these programs, and the research demonstrates, okay, that we'll see an increase in resources towards the downtown residents that are most vulnerable, right? We also have to remember that the research shows higher police presence means that women feel safer and men often don't. And there's less research, but the research that exists says that members of marginalized communities do not feel safer with an increase in police, even when those police aren't there to just surveil them or to just arrest them. Rather, this is a mixed bag, and the way that you feel about this revitalization project is always going to depend on who you are.
And while you're here, I did want to ask you about a related item. It was in the news. We've been it's been in the newscast this morning. But there's a pilot project over the next few months. We're going to see officers in Windsors wearing microphones and some cruisers equipped with cameras. How do you think we should be looking at this?
Sometimes I joke, Amy, that I haven't answered a question cleanly since 1998, so I'm going to apologize beforehand. On one side, we want police to operate in a transparent manner so that we know what our tax dollars are paying for, and to make sure that police excesses are minimalized. Right? We want a police force that we can see and be proud of what we see. This is part of that effort, and I think it's great. On the other hand, when people are calling police, they are often calling at the most vulnerable times in their lives. To what extent do we want them recorded during those moments? That should be deeply unsettling for all Windsorites.